Welcome back to a new episode of Let's Talk Golf, a bi-weekly podcast featuring all things golf. I'm your host, PGA professional Mark Guttenberg. This week's guest brings a thirst for the game and a passion that is extremely contagious. His name is Brit Hume. He was a journalist before drifting into TV news in 1973 at ABC News. He's lived in and around the Washington area nearly all his life. In fact, he was born there. At ABC, he covered Congress and eventually the White House for 8 years. In 1997, he went to work for Fox News Channel, where he has been ever since. He was Fox's Washington managing editor and anchor of its 6 p.m. newscast special report for 10 years. He stepped down since then from full-time work at Fox at the end of 2008 and is now part-time as the network's senior political analyst. Brit does commentary on the political news of the day, working 100 days a year. But beware, my friends, because this conversation is not about politics. It's about golf. Oftentimes, my guests on Let's Talk Golf are professionals in the industry that can share their insights into different aspects of the game, such as equipment, fitness, teaching, or a variety of topics that our listeners might be interested in. This week's guest brings passion for the game as his topic, and lots of it. We're meeting here at Bull Run Golf Club in Haymarket, Virginia, my workplace, for some friendly conversation, lunch, and a round of golf. I've known Brit Hume for the past 15 years, when one day he showed up on my doorstep looking for help with his game after returning to golf after a 40-year layoff. I've had the pleasure of developing a long-lasting friendship with Brit that has included quite a few rounds of golf, as well as many sessions on the lesson tee. And by the way, he plays to a very respectable 9 handicap from the senior tees. So Brit Hume, welcome to Let's Talk Golf.
Glad to be here, Mark. Thanks for doing this.
Well, Brit, I am so honored to have you. We've been friends for a long time, and what you bring to the game of golf is truly a passion for the game. You love the game, and we've had many conversations about it. So if you don't mind, Brit, how about taking us back to maybe your beginnings in the game and when you played your first round of golf? Do you remember that?
When I was a kid, my father was a good player and always wanted me to play, but I was kind of a street kid. And growing up in the city of Washington back then, the old Washington Senators were still there. And baseball was the summer game. And
Griffith Stadium.
Griffith Stadium was still standing, and it was a long walk with my buddies, and I could actually walk out there and pay 75 cents to sit in the bleachers and watch the games, and we were fans of this team. They never won anything, but we were fans anyway. And we played sandlot baseball, and I didn't want to go out to some club somewhere and play golf or tennis or anything. I wanted to play baseball. That's what we did. That's what all my friends did. And, I lived way down in the city. So that was what we did, and so I never really was interested in golf or tennis either. And I did finally play one summer. I worked most summers to try to help put myself through school, but I took one summer off and played golf, and I had a lot of fun with it. But I never got any good at it. I broke 100, I think, once, and didn't come close more than that one time, and so I just dropped the game and didn't play again. As you noted, for 40 years until I was 59 years old.
Wow. And
I took it up then mostly because I'd played tennis for 25 years, and I was getting too old to run around the tennis court, and I had a bad ankle that hampered my tennis, so I still have that. And so I took up golf. My wife kind of got me into it. I introduced her to tennis. She got me going on golf again, and I didn't think I ever would want to do it. And I was up in Maine, and she was having a lesson with a pro up there at a place called the Prouts Neck Country Club up in Maine, not too far from Portland. And he was a Fox News viewer. And he said, "Are you in relation to Brit Hume?" And she said, "Yeah, he's my husband." "Oh, is he here?" "Yes." "Well, I'd like to meet him. Would you bring him down?" So I went down to the lesson tee while she was taking the lesson the next day, and I watched her flail away, and he was trying to show her what to do. And I looked at it, and I said, "Boy, am I glad I never picked up this game again." It brought back to me all my memories of just how hard it was and how many horrible shots I'd hit. And I said, none of this for me.
No
and
way.
Finally, the pro, a guy named Bryce Roberts, great guy, you've played with him, came over and handed me a 6-iron and insisted I take a few swings. I didn't want to do it, but I did it anyway. And I took a few swings to no good effect, I promise you. But something about it kind of caught my imagination. I thought, well, I ought to give this a try. So I bought a pair of golf shoes, and I used borrowed clubs, and I began to, and he gave me a couple of lessons and so forth. And I finally said, I think I'm going to try this. So I got back to Virginia, and I looked around to find a pro, and I found you. And with your help, I developed not a really good game, but a decent golf swing with good fundamentals that I was willing to practice. And I created a place out here at our farm out here in the town of all places of Hume, Virginia, where I had a tee box where I could stand up and hit balls out into a field. And so I'd go to see you for a lesson on a Friday, because I didn't work Fridays in those days, and then I'd go out there and practice what you'd preach to me. And it's you take it up at 59, it's very hard. But at least I knew something about how to hold the club, although, as you've noted, my grip tends to slip back and get too weak from time to time. But in any case, so I started playing, and I made all kinds of friends, and I've loved playing, and I retired at the age of 65 in part to play more golf, and I've done it, and we have a place in Florida now, and I play 3 or 4 times a week down there. I love the game. I love the friends I've made. I love the golf courses. They're beautiful places. And every now and then I'll have a round that'll bring me back.
Well, that's a great little intro there. So we kind of got you back into golf by default. But once you got back in, you got back in. I mean, you have the passion for it. I know you recently shot 77 just the other day.
At 77 at Chevy Chase, where I play sometimes, and it was a satisfying round.
What a great round that was. You know, over the years, 15 years of knowing you, we've had a lot of great conversations, a lot of great meals over the game of golf. And one of the things I remember in the early stages when you came to me for golf, we had a conversation about some of the things your dad taught you. And one of the things your dad referred to, I'd like you to kind of retrace the story a little bit, is how the golf swing is a little bit like a race. You recall that?
I do, and I think it's spot on. What he said was, the golf swing is like a race between your hands and the club head. And when you take your backswing and come to the top, your hands are way ahead. The club is way behind, and your hands are way ahead. And when you finish, the club head is ahead. And what you want to try to do in the golf swing is maximize the catching up that the club head will inevitably do at the point where you're going through the ball. So, and that, of course, brings into play the concept of having a little lag where you start that downswing and the club head stays behind, and then the club head automatically and naturally is going to race like mad to reach its concluding position ahead of your hands. Yeah. And you see the great player Sergio Garcia does it so spectacularly. You see, and he kind of pulls from the top. He's kind of pulling down, and he hasn't released his hands.
Got more lag than anyone.
He's got his hands are still cocked. He'll still set, and when it comes through, that he hits these rocket shots off his irons that are a result, at least in part, of the fact that club head is doing what it must, and that is to come flying through there to catch up and end up ahead.
Well, I love that analogy, and I especially like it because sequence, as we like to refer to it in golf, the order of things, sometimes gets way out of whack when the hands go first. And so having this race concept, let the lower body kind of lead, let the hands catch up, that just put it in a nutshell.
Well, the other thing about that is, though, that it emphasizes the point that you must hold the grip gently, and you must not squeeze it. And squeezing the club, particularly on an important shot, there's a tendency, it's a human tendency, I think, to tighten your grip. You may not even know you're doing it, to tighten your grip on the club as you're coming through. And what that does, it kills club head speed. And lately I've had a few good rounds, and I feel like my grip is almost sloppy. Like I'm almost going to let go of the club coming through. And I think if I do that, I'll lose control. Heaven knows what will happen. I mean, it's just an unconscious thought. But the truth is that you got to let the club head do what the club head was designed to do. And that, and in an interesting way is you tend to get straight shots that way. You give up control to get control. I've said to myself. I've said it to myself a million times. Doing it's another matter.
Good point. Yeah, I used to say surrender to the target. Don't try to control it. Just let the ball find a way to get there. So, well, Britt, that's really some great insight there. You mentioned you play about 3 times a week now, so you certainly do have the passion for the game. In your career as a political analyst, amongst the many other things you've done, have you had the opportunity to play golf with any presidents? Have you played golf with any of the presidents?
I've played golf with both President Bush 41 and President Bush 43. And I'll tell you about both of them. President Bush 41 now is too ill to play golf and too old, but he's still in there pitching. He had the lip wedge, like you wouldn't believe.
I know about the lip wedge.
And George W. Bush is the same way.
It's the 15th club in the bag.
Yeah, I mean, I remember once we were playing at the Cape Arundel Golf Club up in Kennebunkport, Maine, which is where they have their summer place. It's kind of a fun course, and I was putting for birdie on, I think it's the 15th green, which is a short par 4, and I'd gotten scratched it up onto the green and had a decent putted birdie, and President Bush 41 is narrating the whole thing as if we were golfing it. He's standing over the ball. You can see the tension in his hands. I'm thinking, would you kindly pipe down?
Funny.
And President Bush 43 is the same way. He's after you all the time. He's good fun to play with. He's a pretty good player.
Yeah. Well, they've got rich golf tradition in their family. The Walker Cup,
exactly.
Herbert Walker Bush. You know, talking about 41, President 41, you're quite. When it comes to wanting an interview with a guy, you will do whatever it takes. I mean, and I want you to tell us a little bit about George Bush jumping out of a plane at 80 years old. What you had to do to get that interview?
Well, what he did was, he likes to do these parachute jumps, and he did them pretty late in life, and it was something I never had any interest in at all. I never even thought about it, and I got an invitation to come down to College Station for his 80th birthday observances, and a lot of people were coming. And he was going to do a parachute jump, and he said that if I would do it, he would give me an interview. Well, I couldn't. There's no way to say no to that. The truth is, Mark, I didn't particularly want to do it, but
you were trying to get your doctor to give you all kinds of reasons you couldn't do it.
Well, I was ready to. And my doctor said, "You want to do that? Go ahead." So, and the truth is, you worry about being frightened, and I wasn't worried about that. I wouldn't. It was odd. I was afraid I would become afraid. In other words, I was afraid when the moment came and the door opened and I had to jump out of the airplane.
Right.
And it was a tandem jump. Of
course. So
you got a professional paratrooper with you and you're attached to him. But there's certain things that you have to execute. The passenger has to do certain things the right way or the jump will get messed up. Yeah. And when the moment came, I was fine. I jumped out. And the only thing was that I get that pressure in my ears. It causes some real pain.
Yeah.
And we were up there at 13,000 feet in free fall before the chute opened for a little while, and that pressure on my ears was just absolutely killing me.
Oh boy! I
and
can
you need to face down and spread your arms out to get the two of you in the right position. And I kept pulling one of my hands in to try to blow my nose, hold my nose and blow the pain out, blow the pressure out through my ears. I was finally able to do it, but he kept pushing my hand back. I kept pulling it in, but anyway, we straightened out. We landed. We had a good landing. We both landed on our feet. I would note that Chuck Norris, the great actor and martial arts expert, also jumped, as did the president. And I was the only one that landed on all fours, except for one thing, Mark.
What's that?
Well, they'll rush out to you on the landing zone to get the chute detached from it in case a gust of wind comes along and blows you across the field. So they're running out there so you're standing there and they're getting the stuff. I realized I was incredibly dizzy. Whatever the inner ear problem is that causes that pain, I was dizzy, and I had to walk across to where the Fox cameras were set up, and I thought, if I walk across, I'm going to fall down. After all of this, and after landing on my feet, I'm going to collapse on it. So I ripped it. They gave me this helmet that was made out of rubber because your head is below the paratrooper's head, and they don't want you with a hard hat on because you could bang him in the face. So I had this thing look like a bathing cap on. It was the dorkiest looking thing you ever saw. And I ripped that off. And inside my jumpsuit, I tucked a ball cap. And I put it on at what I thought was a rakish angle and started walking across the landing zone to where the Fox cap. And I thought, if I'm not careful, I'm going to fall down. Fortunately, I sort of wide-tracked my way over there. I didn't go down. I recovered my balance, and so it ended happily.
Well done. Well, I can promise you this. If you'd have required me to jump out of a plane to do this interview, we wouldn't be sitting here today. That's passion above and beyond. So you've played with a couple of presidents. Who would you say is the greatest presidential golfer of all time?
Well, I don't really know. I guess Eisenhower was the most enthusiastic and most noted. He was a member of Augusta, played down there all the time. That famous tree that they finally came down was named after him. Right? And he played in Washington. He played at Burning Tree Club outside Washington, which is an all-men's club where politicians these days can't join there. And if anybody who is a member runs for office or gets named to a cabinet position, they have to resign because you can't be in a club that discriminates against women. But
makes sense.
Yeah, and so that's. But I would say Eisenhower was the most noted. Bill Clinton was an avid golfer.
JFK was pretty good.
JFK was supposed to be very good, but he had a lot of back trouble, and he kind of concealed golf from the public. But he had a reputation as having a good swing. I never saw him play, but and of course Clinton was an avid golfer. Bush 41 was a good golfer, somewhat unorthodox, but not bad. Bush 43 is a good golfer. And Trump, although he played with Peyton Manning the other day, and I saw Peyton at an event, and he said that Trump had shot 88. And from what I'd heard about Trump's game, I thought he would have probably done better than that. But he's supposed to be pretty good. I've seen his swing, video of his swing. He's a little unorthodox on the backswing, but he comes through well. He looks like he ought to be a pretty good player.
He gets a little out in front of it with his upper body on his follow through. But he's actually got a pretty good move there. Okay, so let's move on to present company accepted, of course. But what would your dream foursome be? Let's take me out of the equation because I don't want to put you on the spot there.
Well, I would like to have you in it, but
I'd love to be.
I've always thought it'd be fun to play with a couple of the television commentators whose commentary I enjoy. I'd like to have Peter Costas in the foursome as my coach.
Okay.
And I would like to have Gary McCord as a guy supplying the humor.
Okay.
And then it'd be a close call between Jim Nance, who's sort of a friend whom I know a little bit, who's a very, very nice man.
Yeah.
And Roger Maltby, who just seems like, to me, I never met him, I don't know him at all, but he seems like he'd be about the greatest guy. He's such a nice guy. So I'd like to play with those three guys. I mean, there are others I'd like to play with as well. I mean, a number of others, but I'd like to, I'd like to play around in the company of Fred Couples sometime because he seems like he'd be such good company.
Yes.
And so.
Well, those are some pretty good choices there. So I appreciate that.
You notice that none of them is a politician.
I like that. In fact, they were all golf commentators / teachers. So This is what I mean, folks. He's a real student and passionate about the game. So, you did take 40 years off from the game, and then you decide to come back, as you mentioned earlier, at age 59. Because you really didn't have that much of a history in the game, I wouldn't think it was like riding a bike, but you took to it pretty quickly.
Well, I knew how to hold the club. Mm-hmm. I mean, I knew how to put the overlap, the classic overlap grip on a golf club. It was familiar to me, and the reverse overlap grip for the putter was familiar to me. So the club felt comfortable in my hands, but I had no idea how to swing it. And I played tennis for 25 years, so you won't be surprised to learn that the first few irons I swung out were duck hooks like you wouldn't believe. Mm-hmm. So I had to get that worked out, and then of course I developed the inevitable slice that everybody has, and I had to try to work my way through that to the point where, and I still tend, when I'm not swinging well, to hit at least a push, and sometimes I'll hit a big high slice. It's just something that nearly all golfers combat, and you have to find a way to get away from that. So.
Well, that's some pretty good information there. So after 40 years, you came to me and you started taking golf lessons. And you do seem to be someone that likes to take golf lessons, which I'm certainly happy about that. But when you take lessons, what is it you're usually looking for? I know I'm not the only guy you've taken lessons from, but why do you take lessons, and what do you usually try to get out of a golf lesson?
Well, what I'm usually trying to do is to... I have enough instruction so that on paper at least I could probably tell you with some accuracy what the correct way to swing a golf club is. I mean, the basic fundamentals of it. Obviously, what happens is in the course of playing is that tendencies that you develop as a golfer tend to creep back. Your grip, if you've been plagued by a weak grip, too weak a grip, or too strong a grip, whatever it is, you tend to slip back into your old habits. And you don't do it necessarily consciously, and you can't always figure it out yourself. You'll see the result of a shot, and you'll think, "Well, I must not have gotten through that properly, or I must have released the club too soon, or I must not have turned enough." But a pro can tell you that. Mm-hmm. You can't. It's hard to figure it out yourself. I mean, it's not impossible, but it's hard. So I usually when I go to see a pro, it is that my game is off, and I can't figure out why. I don't know. I'll either be, a loss of length, or not that I ever had much and still don't, but, the shots will be weak, they'll be offline, I'll be too thin, I'll be hitting too fat. All those things creep into my game as they do, I think, for most golfers. So you want somebody to look at that and say, this is what you need to do to correct that. And, I have this tendency sometimes. Nearly every pro that's ever looked at me likes my position at the top of my backswing. And my basic motion is, basically sound. But something happens on the way down that torpedoes the shot.
Mm-hmm.
And pros who don't use video equipment can't always pick it up. That's one of the things I like about coming to you is you'll use the technology to give you a frame-by-frame analysis of what is happening on that downswing. You can see when you release the club. Now, a lot of pros can pick it up visually. You can too. But that kind of specificity and precision about analyzing the golf swing is very valuable. So my game will get into trouble, and I'll go to see you or whoever's around, and see if I can figure out what's causing the problem. And usually it helps.
Well, I agree with you, and it's nice that you mentioned the technology because nowadays we have so much more than we ever had. Video technology, that's kind of considered old school now, although I think it's still very helpful. We have things like FlightScope and TrackMan, these launch monitors that measure every kind of spin and path and club face angle during the swing that you can. And I like that stuff. I really think it's helpful. I think there is a niche in there for like the better player that has to have it. The average golfer, I'm not so sure all the time if we want to bombard them with a bunch of numbers, but certainly video is to me still the most valuable tool I have when teaching. So thanks for saying
I think it's helpful.
And as you've kind of talked about your game a little bit, I was going to ask you a little bit about the strengths and the weaknesses of your game. I know you pretty well. I could probably list them for you, but I'd like to hear
Please
from
don't.
you. Well, I would just go straight to the strengths. And one is that you don't lose many golf balls when you play golf. You keep that ball in play pretty well, I think.
It's funny in Florida where there's a lot of water around.
Right.
All of us who play down there, and the guys I play, we lose a lot of balls. So when I went back to work, Mark, last fall during the campaign for 2 months, full-time anchoring again after 8 years of not doing it. Took a lot out of me. And in fact, I think it really hurt my golf games. I didn't play for 2 months, and it exhausted me. But as a consequence of that, when I finished it up, the executive at Fox who asked me to do it, who thought I'd really helped him out because they were in a tight spot, walks into the office I was using in New York when I was up there for the election. He's got this tote big bag, this big shoulder bag, and in it were 3 dozen golf balls, new golf balls, good balls, right?
Right.
So I took them down to Florida with me, and I burned through a box a month, a dozen a month.
Wow.
That's a lot. That's a lot. I've been home now for 6 weeks. I've lost a grand total of 2 balls.
Boy.
Different courses, no water, right?
Amazing.
So I can keep the ball in front of me. And my weakness has always been I've never had much length. So I'm a short hitter, even though I'm a tall guy, and on paper I ought to be. But I'm old now, and I can't move. And even I have lost length, and I didn't have much to begin with. So I struggle with that. And it means that if I play from the members' tees most places now, most greens I can't reach. You get these 400-yard holes, even 380-yard holes. I can't reach them in 2. I mean, I can hit 2 of my best shots, and I'll come up short. So, it increasingly, as time goes on, the short game becomes critical. And, of course, the short game is challenging for several reasons. It's not that the shots in the short game are that hard to hit. A great many people who may have other weaknesses can usually learn to chip and they learn to pitch all right. But every short game shot is different. If you've got a 5-iron into a green, that's a 5-iron into a green on almost any golf course you can think of. Yes, you have to compensate for the wind and whether it's uphill or downhill, but it's a pretty straightforward deal. But if you've got 74 yards to the pin, you may have to carry a bunker. You may be in a position where it's better to roll it up. You maybe have to bring it up onto the green nice and high and stop it. You got a lot of things that you have to know how to do, and every one of them is different. So learning the short game is hard in the sense that it takes a lot of practice in a lot of different situations. It's possible, but it's challenging. But if you can do that, you can score. It's hard to make birdies that way, but you can score.
Yeah. And I mean, there's nothing wrong at age 74 playing from a shorter set of tees if it keeps the game interesting to you.
I will say this to you. I think I played with some guys a few weeks ago at the club where we play. And they're younger than me, but they're not young men. These are guys 65 and older, right? And I said, let's play up on the senior tees. It's more fun. They said, no, we don't want to do it. We're not doing that. We don't want to do that, right? And so we played from the members' tees. Those guys didn't hit any greens all day.
Yeah.
And I thought, are they having any fun? Now I go up and play on the senior tees. I can now hit a lot of greens, and I'm having fun.
Exactly.
And I'm turning it, and I give up 3 strokes off what would be my handicap to play the senior tees.
It's worth it.
It's totally worth it, and I totally recommend it. And I think golfers who there's a lot of macho stuff in golf.
Yeah, there really
a lot
is.
of golfers who can pulverize the ball off the tee, but they don't know where it's going, and then the rest of their game is ragged. Because if they're long enough, they can certainly hit a certain number of greens, and that's the story of their golf game. But in the fullness of time, you're going to need the short game, and the short game really is key.
My dad turned 90 this past June, so for his birthday, I took him on a 3-day golf trip down to Williamsburg. At 90 years old, he doesn't hit the ball very far, so we played not the ladies' tee, but one set up.
Yeah, the seniors.
And I actually played there with him. Yeah. I had a blast, Britt.
Bet.
I mean, I'm still hitting 270, 280-yard drives, and not as long as I used to, but it's like every hole, boy, I could almost try to drive this green, or I could hit a wedge here, and I could start shooting in the 60s again, which I haven't done. So I'd say more power to people for moving up. Tee it forward. That's what makes the game fun.
And the handicap system takes that into account, and your handicap will come out reflecting that. So you have a great score, and it won't knock your handicap down that much. So it all comes out fine. That's what the handicap system is for. I to any golfer out there listening, I totally, if you're older, and I totally recommend it. And if you're scoring badly, give it a try.
Tee it forward, absolutely. So currently, the rules of golf are going under a major metamorphosis. In 2019, I think we're going to have a complete change. 2018, I think, is also another year to kind of review them. Are you currently up to date on some of the changes? What's your opinion on some of them? Tell me your thoughts on that and the ban on anchoring putters. I want you to give me your points on those as well.
I think that the rules changes that I've heard about, some of which have to do with the ball moving on the green without your agency. Right. I've never understood why that rule is the way it was. I don't like the rule. The game of golf is honeycombed with rules, some of which you can look at them and you can say, well, obviously you can't prove your lie. That's cheating. We can all see why that's cheating. But there are things in the game of golf that were rules that you couldn't figure out what value they were trying to protect. The famous episode when Stuart Sink hit a ball when the ball wasn't in the bunker, but he had to stand in the bunker and hit it, right? So he hits it out of the bunker, and it goes in. It went up toward the green and landed in another bunker. His caddy came in and raked the bunker he'd been standing in. He was called on a penalty for that because it was deemed that raking the bunker would test the sand.
Right.
I thought that was the most absurd thing I've ever seen. And I think the rule against anchoring putters makes no sense at all. I think you shouldn't be able to get down on the green and use the putter like a pool cue.
Right.
You ought to be required to hit it with the club head, right? But I don't know why holding it against your body is wrong. You ought to be able to use your whole body for any swing or any play you want, as long as you're hitting it with the club head. I don't understand the rule. I don't know what it's trying to protect. I think it's a terrible rule.
I totally agree. And, if it was meant to make it more challenging for the guys that were doing it, take a guy like Adam Scott. He got away from it and won twice right immediately after, so maybe it even helped him. It really hasn't done what it was supposedly set out to do, and that's to take an advantage away from guys. Even now with Bernhard Langer and Scott McCarron, I think it is they're arguing about are they touching their shirt, are they not? Let them go, for crying out loud, Either way.
I don't understand the rule. I don't know what they're trying to protect.
So I guess they're trying to simplify things, and we'll find out in 2019 just how simple they can do it. One of the rules that's going to change if they accept it is when you drop a golf ball now, instead of dropping it shoulder height, you can drop it an inch from the ground. Right. Which is almost like placing the ball. There's another one I don't understand. Well, anyway,
I don't mind that particularly because sometimes you have to drop the ball. You move it away from a position where you had a decent lie, but you couldn't hit it because there was an obstruction. Yeah. And you have to drop it. You end up with a worse lie. I don't know what they're trying to protect with that. I think you ought to be able to place it. Time
will tell. I think we're gonna probably get some improvement, but it's very confusing.
Well, I completely sympathize with the rules about the ball moving on the green, though.
Yeah, that was crazy.
Just replace it.
Yeah.
I don't know. What's the
biggest word in the rules of golf that should be emphasized is intent. If your intent was to gain an unfair advantage by doing something, then that should be penalized.
I agree.
But what you're talking about, Dustin Johnson taking practice strokes, the ball moving, penalizing him, not penalizing. It's too much
My
confusion.
view is that if you're doing a practice stroke and you're standing behind the ball, or to the side of the ball and the putting green, you inadvertently hit it. If you didn't have an intent to hit it, you ought to just put it back and play it.
Well, yeah, I mean,
how can you cheat that way? You're not cheating.
Exactly. Yeah, they're a little. I'll never forget. Jack Nicklaus once said that it's easier to pass the bar exam than to interpret the decisions rules on the rules of golf. There's a 600-page book.
That's ridiculous.
Just on the rules to interpret the rules of golf.
Ridiculous.
It's ridiculous. All right, Britt. Well, thank you so much for all this feedback you're giving me. What's on your bucket list? You have anything left golf-wise on your bucket list?
Well, I'd like someday to have a legitimate single-digit handicap. And, I play to a 9 from the front tees on the golf courses where I play, but that's just because they penalize you 3 shots for moving up, which is, as you've heard me say, is totally worth it. So I'm about, when my handicap comes out the next time, I've had a few good scores, I'll be around a 10 or 11. I'd sure like to have an 8 or a 9 before I'm hang it up. I'd like to do that. And I'd like to shoot my age someday. I came within 3 shots of
getting close.
Yesterday.
You're getting
I'd
close.
Like to do that. That'd be exciting.
In fact, as of our interview, when we set this whole thing up, you sent me an email one day, 78,
right,
and now yesterday, 74.
77.
77, sorry. So 74 is the goal. That's the target goal. That's definitely that's something that I think you're going to get.
And I used to have a big, long list of golf courses that I hadn't played that I wanted to play, and I could say I played all these places. I've played a lot of wonderful golf courses,
you have,
and I'm pleased about that. But nowadays, my objective on golf is to play the game as well as my abilities will allow, and to play on good golf courses that are well maintained, and with reasonably smooth greens. So, and I don't really care where they are, and I don't care what the courses are called, and I have no, I've played up at Pine Valley a few times, magnificent golf course, very hard, and I got out. Last round I had up there one year was an 82, and I was so excited about that when I went out of left the gates, I said, I'm never coming back here again because I'll never be able to do that well again. I made the mistake of going back one more time. It was a mistake, and I have no desire to go back there again. I've played Augusta, and I guess if I were invited, I'd go again, but I'm in no hurry to do that again. And it's a magnificent club, no question about it. Beautiful golf course, full of history, and exciting to be there and all that. But once you've done it, you've done it, and they won't let you wear shorts, and so I mean, it's a place you have to revere because it's so much of a cathedral of golf. But for my purposes, I want to play on reasonably good courses in good condition with friends that I like, as well as I can play the game, and I don't really care what the name of the golf club is or whether it has a lot of prestige or history or not.
Great stuff, Britt. So we want to play with Peter Costas, Gary McCord, and
maybe Roger Maltby or Jim Nance.
Maybe Roger Maltby or Jim Nance. Single-digit handicap.
Right.
Just enjoy the game, play golf with friends, keep getting better.
I just like to get to know those guys a little bit.
Yeah, they seem like
Costas
great
gave me a free lesson a few years ago.
Right, I remember.
And it helped me a lot to get a little length back. It wasn't anything you haven't suggested yourself, but he gave me a certain emphasis about it. It was interesting. What he did was, just so anybody's interested, he did something that I'd never seen anybody do before, which was he put a ball on a tee and he handed me like a 6-iron. And he said, I want you to hit this ball with your hands and wrists only. I don't want you to move your shoulders, arms, body, make a turn of any kind. Just cock your wrists and hit the ball. So I did it. And it went a lot farther than I thought it would. It went about 50 or 60 yards as a 7-iron. I thought, my God. So there's that element of power in the golf swing that is underutilized. And at least he thought it was in my swing. So he wanted me to make sure I set my wrist fully on the way back, cocked it back, and he wanted to make sure I released it fully coming through. And his thought was from the top. He didn't say, body first or any of that, although that sound. He said, fling, throw, hurl the club head at the ball. Just throw it at the ball. Well, I did, and when, I missed a few, but when I hit them, they went 15, 20 yards farther than I'd been hitting them. So it was a help.
That's something everybody's looking for, an extra 10 to 15 yards. Well, Britt, I can't thank you enough for taking the time out of your very busy schedule to come here. You're a class act. You're very gracious for accepting this interview. Now I'm looking forward to an afternoon on the links with you. So what do you say? You ready to go tee it up?
I'd love to do it, Mark. I'm thrilled to be with you, and I'm honored that you asked me.
All right. Well, let's go grab some lunch and play some golf.
All right.
What a great man Brit Hume is. I could listen to him tell stories all day. It's quite obvious that Brit knows how to talk golf. I'm so lucky to be able to call him friend, and I hope you listeners enjoyed Brit's insights and experiences he shared with us today. So that does conclude another episode of Let's Talk Golf, which is now available on iTunes, Stitcher, and YouTube. I hope you like the show and will subscribe, give us a rating and a review. And if you want to share your thoughts, contact me through my website, guttenbergsgolf.com. That's GUTTENBERGSGOLF.com. guttenbergsgolf.com. So thanks for listening. I'm your host, PGA professional Mark Guttenberg. We'll be back in 2 weeks for the next episode of Let's Talk Golf.